There is a specific kind of person who refuses to let the machine do everything for them. There is a specific kind of person who feels a quiet pull every time they see an old Japanese car, sitting slightly imperfect under street light, paint faded in uneven patches, engine ticking softly after a drive, as if the machine is still breathing even when it is supposed to be resting. They are not always car enthusiasts in the way people assume. They are not necessarily chasing speed, status, or attention. In fact, many of them avoid modern cars precisely because those things have already been solved, automated, polished into something almost invisible. And that is where the story begins. Because this isn't really about old Japanese cars. It never was. What looks like a preference for machines is actually a preference for something much deeper. In the human mind, a way of thinking, a way of feeling in control of a world that is increasingly abstract, automated, and detached from direct experience. If you look closely at these people, a pattern starts to appear. They are drawn to systems they can understand with their hands. Engines that respond not to software logic, but to physical input. Steering that communicates road texture instead of filtering it out. Cars where maintenance is not hidden behind sealed systems, but visible, mechanical, and explainable. At a surface level, this seems like nostalgia, a longing for the past. But psychologically, nostalgia is rarely about the past itself. It is about emotional certainty. The brain selectively remembers environments where cause and effect felt clear, where effort produced visible results, where the world felt readable. This is where a key psychological concept becomes important: internal locus of control. People with a strong internal locus of control tend to believe that outcomes are directly influenced by their own actions. They feel responsible for what happens to them, and more importantly, they feel capable of affecting it. In contrast, an external locus of control leans toward the belief that outcomes are shaped by systems, chance, or forces outside personal influence. Old Japanese cars, especially from the late 80s and 90s era, unintentionally reinforce that internal mindset. You turn the key, and the response is immediate and honest. If something feels off, you can often trace it, understand it, fix it. The machine does not hide its condition behind layers of interpretation. And for a certain type of mind, that clarity is addictive. But what is often missed is that this attraction is not really about mechanical simplicity. It is about psychological legibility, a world that can be read, understood, and influenced without needing permission from systems too complex to fully grasp. Modern life rarely offers that feeling. Most systems today are designed to be seamless, which is another way of saying they are designed to be invisible. Software updates change behavior without explanation. Digital systems optimize decisions before you are aware a decision is being made. Even vehicles now anticipate, correct, and intervene in ways that remove the need for conscious input. Convenient, yes, but also psychologically flattening. And so, for some people, an older machine becomes a form of resistance. Not loud resistance, not ideological resistance, but quiet resistance in the form of preference. A choice to engage with something that does not smooth away effort, but requires it. If you watch these individuals closely, another pattern emerges. They tend to pay attention to detail that others overlook, not because they are obsessive in a clinical sense, but because their attention has been trained to detect variation. Engine tone, throttle response, vibration through the chassis. The slight delay before mechanical parts fully engage. This is related to a cognitive process known as pattern recognition. Pattern recognition is the brain's ability to detect structure and repeated information. In most people, it operates unconsciously and efficiently. But in those who develop a strong sensitivity to mechanical systems, it becomes more refined. They begin to notice inconsistencies, micro-changes, feedback loops that others ignore. And over time, this creates a different relationship with objects, not as static tools, but as systems with behavior. An old Japanese car is not experienced as a car in the abstract sense. It is experienced as a dialogue. The driver inputs something, the machine responds, and the quality of that response becomes meaningful information. This creates a loop that is deeply reinforcing. Attention leads to understanding, understanding leads to control, and control leads to satisfaction. But there is something even deeper underneath this. Many of these people were shaped in environments where unpredictability was common, but explanation was limited, not necessarily in dramatic ways, but in subtle ones. Systems that changed without warning, expectations that were unclear, outcomes that did not always match effort. In such environments, the mind develops a strong sensitivity to anything that behaves consistently, A machine that always responds the same way under the same conditions becomes psychologically stabilizing. It is not just transportation. It is predictability made physical, and predictability, when rare, becomes valuable. This is where emotion enters the picture in a quiet but powerful way, because attachment is not only formed through joy or excitement, it is also formed through relief. The relief of knowing that something will behave as expected. The relief of being able to diagnose a problem rather than guess at it. The relief of engaging with a system that does not conceal its logic. Over time, that relief becomes identity. I like old Japanese cars slowly becomes I am someone who values clarity, control, and mechanical honesty. And once identity attaches itself to a pattern of thinking, it begins to filter perception. Modern cars start to feel sterile not just because they are different, but because they remove the need for participation. Everything is optimized, but optimization can feel like absence when you value engagement. There is also an emotional layer that is often unspoken. These machines carry memory, not only personal but cultural. Many people associate them with earlier periods of life when things felt slower, more tangible, less mediated by screens and systems. Even if that memory is partially constructed, it still carries emotional weight. The mind does not distinguish perfectly between memory and interpretation. It responds to both as lived experience. So when someone restores an old Japanese car, they are not only repairing metal and rubber. They are reconstructing a feeling of coherence between past and present, between action and outcome, between intention and result. And yet, there is a subtle irony here. The same traits that draw someone to mechanical clarity can also make modern life more difficult to tolerate. Because once you become sensitive to systems that obscure their own logic, you start noticing how many parts of life operate that way. Services you cannot fully inspect, decisions made by algorithms you cannot see, processes that require trust without understanding. This awareness can create a quiet tension, not necessarily dissatisfaction, but a sense of distance from how most things now function. And so the old machine becomes more than a hobby. It becomes a reference point, a reminder that not all systems have to be opaque. That complexity does not have to erase understanding. That engagement does not have to be replaced by automation. But beneath all of this, the deeper question is not about cars at all. It is about how much control a person needs to feel present in their own life. Because every preference, even one that seems technical or aesthetic, eventually leads back to a psychological need. The need to feel that actions matter, that inputs have consequences, that the world is not entirely out of reach. Old Japanese cars simply make that need visible. They turn it into something you can hear, feel, and adjust with your own hands. And maybe that is why they stay relevant, even in a world that has moved far beyond them in efficiency. Not because they are faster, or safer, or smarter, but because they still ask you to participate. And in the end, the real question is not why someone is drawn to them. It is what kind of life makes participation feel rare enough to become meaningful. When you notice what you are drawn to, what does it reveal about the kind of control, clarity, or connection you might be missing elsewhere?